Man Up, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. And now, it's time to Man Up.
Welcome to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. I am Joe Stopulos, and today I will be joined by Dr. Bud Marr and Bo Bonner, the hosts of The Uncommon Good here on Iowa Catholic Radio, to discuss heroic marriage, specifically discuss marriage as an institution and what that means for society. So a little bit philosophical today, but I think it'll help to set the stage here as we're in the middle of the series on the importance of marriage and how marriage fits into society. Let us start in prayer. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. We've done a few crossover shows in the history of the Man Up Show with the Uncommon Good, even going back to the Father Zach days. Always good to have them on. So if you haven't listened, go back. But they're both professors. They are both professors at Mercy College of Health Sciences, and are very well versed in all these things. And I asked them, hey guys, would you want to come on and talk about marriage? Not so much as we've been doing about their own marriages, but to talk about marriage as an institution. How does it play into society? Why do we even have marriage? These kinds of questions that are maybe more macro questions about marriage. Obviously, this series has been mostly dedicated to the micro, to the very fundamental X's and O's of what makes a marriage run. And we've been highlighting good marriages, but I think it's important as we step back today and kind of wax poetic, philosophical on why does marriage exist and what role does it play in society. So no one better to have on than the two guys from the Uncommon Good. So stick around. We'll head to a short break, and we'll be right back.
Support for programming provided by Trappist Caskets, a work of the monks of New Melleray Abbey in Peosta, Iowa. Embracing an honest approach to death can more readily affirm the real meaning of life. Trappist caskets and urns are made in the prayerful environment of the monastery using Iowa-grown wood from the Abbey's sustainable forest. Each casket and urn is blessed by a monk. Quietly laboring with their hands for 175 years, the monks offer workmanship at the pinnacle of woodworker's craft. Available for immediate delivery or as a part of a pre-planning program. Learn more at TrappistCaskets.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from the Catholic Tuition Organization. Reduce or eliminate your Iowa income tax and instead give to the Catholic Tuition Organization and receive 75% Iowa tax credits. These tax credits are going fast, so reserve yours today and learn more about the Catholic Tuition Organization at ctoiowa.org. ctoiowa.org. The bottom line, it's for the kids and their futures.
Catholic Tuition Organization, a great investment in our kids. Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Bozen the Florist. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, weddings, whatever the message, say more with Bozen. Bozen.com, 515-244-ROSE. Bozen makes the moment mean more.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Caldwell Parish Funeral Home and Crematory. Caldwell Parish offers services that are unique to the individual while following the Catholic funeral rites. Caldwell Parish Funeral Home and Crematory, Des Moines' only Catholic-owned and operated funeral home.
Support for programming has been provided by Marr Security Services, a family-owned security company that provides full-service security solutions to homes and businesses throughout the Midwest. Learn more at permarsecurity.com. Thank you, Marr Security Services, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio.
Chick-fil-A University Avenue is celebrating 9 amazing years of serving you with a newly remodeled store featuring a fresh, upgraded space. Open 6:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, except Sundays, of course. Catering available. Learn more at chickfil-a.com.
My help comes from you. You're right here.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. Excited to be joined by the esteemed couple from the Uncommon Good. Dr. Bud Marr, Bo Bonner, welcome to the show. It's the only guy couple I've had on. Luckily, most people know that you guys are married to wonderful women here on the show. But today we're going to do a little crossover episode that we're going to, Uncommon Good, Man Up episode. That's right, Father Zach back in the day. And one is, because this plays into the Uncommon Good. You're right. What you guys do on your show is the good of marriage society. And so I thought I'd take kind of a break from the interviewing of couples to talk with you guys about how does this play into the society. So first off, what I've done thus far has been a lot of interviews with couples, really exploring their marriage, how they met, what are the struggles they've had, what's been good, what's been bad, how can we learn from that. But I think you guys can bring a perspective kind of above that, saying, why does marriage exist in the first place, and what does it do for society? So with that, I'm going to pass it back to you guys.
Well, before we get started talking about the 30,000-foot view, which we do like talking about, Joe, I'll admit that, to give some narrative aspect to this, because first of all, I think it's great that you're having examples for people to listen to. That's a wonderful thing to do. Sometimes when people hear from couples, they can get the idea that being a couple is this sort of isolated thing. What I want to commend Bud and Rachel, so my wife's Robin, we have been friends as married couples for 2 decades now. And one of the things that's really important, I think, narratively, to make marriages work is to have married friends and to see the extended family, not only of sort of like your own flesh and blood, cousins and like this, but really the family of families. And so, Bud, to bare my heart and soul and say thank you to you and Rachel, because certainly your guys' friendship as a married couple and like our family and our children being friends for so long, I really do think that that's made a difference, like, of course, in my life, Robin's life, but very much in my kids' life as well.
Yeah, that's huge. And there's something, we talk about the holiness of the ordinary, and I think that's a big part of it, those like basic relationships that build the social network. And the idea of like a network or a web of relationships is so important. Our show, The Uncommon Good, it focuses on Catholic social teaching. And unfortunately, like in today's context, sometimes that's refracted through different sort of political lenses. So there's a way in which more like, you could say progressive Catholics are drawn to Catholic social teaching, and they're concerned, rightly so, about like taking care of creation and the plight of the poor and just economic structures. If you dig into the meat of Catholic social teaching, especially like the social encyclicals of someone like Leo XIII, what the church teaches about marriage and family can't be divorced from what it says about a living wage and these other sort of like important, you could say like economic issues, that if you could say like if a society gets that question wrong, like it won't be able to do enough tweaking in other areas to bring about a just social order. I think that's why John Paul II called the family like the basic social unit that makes up.
Yeah, I was hoping you guys talk about that. So the Catholic Church talks about subsidiarity, and having the local be the best form of governance. And
sometimes, but you keep going.
In general, the family seems to be the most common building block of society. And if that's the case, if we believe that to be true, then we, Catholics and Christians and people of goodwill, should be focusing on making those as the best they can possibly be, right? So like we just got off election season here, and people are all freaking out about the presidential election. It's like, well, actually, what matters a lot is your school board. That matters a lot, and your local elected officials matter a lot. Similarly, your marriage matters a lot, and the marriage of those around you matters a lot, because that's building the blocks of society around you.
Family elections. I just lost my we're having a runoff. No, this is a great point. So John Paul II, Leo XIII, talking about how families not fit into society but comprise them. It's important to point out, right, that families are not perfect societies. So this is a term of art in Catholic social teaching dating back to Leo XIII. Perfect societies are societies that, so to speak, are it's not that they never make mistakes. It's to talk about a society that can be self-existent on its own. And families are not perfect societies. That's why there has to be families of families. However, they're the most basic building block of any society. And part of this is just sheer biology. Where do humans come from? But through progeneration, right? And then the idea, of course, is from time immemorial, by decree of God, the first grace, the church, matrimony, all of these things, is you start seeing an intertwining, an interweaving of the ways in which family life comes into contact with, because, or for the various sort of social structures that any society must have. So it's not only the case that it's very basic one is, where will you have citizens if not coming from a family? It has to go into Brave New World sort of stuff, which I think even in 2024, we're all really worried about just, creating all of our progeny in a lab and then, throwing them out into the world. But also this overlapping allegiances that creates the sort of plenitude of any sort of social reality has to come about with families having a strong base so that they can interact and start to do things like have jobs, go to work, have common projects, have some people allotted to run a city while other people do labor, educate children. You start to see the multitude of ways in which anything that you're going to talk about, what would be called political economy in the classic sense, can't even be imagined without having families discuss it. So even less than maybe like, I always worry about building block because that can seem, again, like atomistic. And that's not what John Paul II means, but I think sometimes people run it that way. Families is more like the water it takes for any fish of politics to swim around in.
Yeah.
There's just not politics without families. And so to presume or assume that families will just sort of exist and make policies without the thought of that backdrop is, I think, the consistent teaching of the Catholic Church to say you just simply can't do that. You can't have the rest of the social network that you want, save that you make sure that families are able to be that water.
Well, modern societies, not only communist ones, but also liberal democratic societies, have been very efficient at eviscerating mediating institutions. And so historically, especially in Christendom and things, there would be these different social cells like guilds or, of course, churches, the family at the foundation of it all, that would serve like this kind of buffering mechanism against like despotic rule. And so if your family experienced a tragedy or you lost your job, you were a widow trying to take care of a child, there'd be this whole network of relationships that was meant to take care of people in those situations. Well, over time, I mean, this kind of gets to the whole like bowling alone phenomenon. We've lost all that, and the family is sort of like the last mediating institution. And so it's no wonder that totalitarian regimes would target that. I mean, not to pick on anyone, because like I said, it's kind of a phenomenon that transcends sort of like political parties or forms of government. But I remember when Barack Obama was running and they released this infograph of like this kind of like Jane Doe. And as she went through her different stages of life, like how the government would take care of her. And to me, it was kind of horrifying because it was just like you said, like you're kind of intimating, Bo, like this isolated individual who becomes dependent on the state at these different various levels of life. And she sort of was portrayed like they meant it as a good thing, operating alone
and in
exactly
this manner. Why is this the case? And I mean, this is where it gets very political fast, is it's good economics to have untied people. To say, don't worry, any need that a family or an extensive family or a family and friend network would used to be responsible for, don't worry, wherever you end up, the government will take care of that. So go take that job 2 time zones away, right? Because like we'll take care of you. Don't worry about the sort of local subsidiary ties that have come about naturally.
So 2 questions on this then. You guys are really holding up the primacy of the family as this really important thing. Okay, so first question would be, how do we strengthen that? What can we do tangentially to build community, build ground on which great families can be built? Oh, that's 1A. 1B is because you just mentioned it, the flying away. All of us do not live in the hometowns where our families are from. Obviously, we are doing our best we can without that. I'd be curious on your thoughts on those 2 things. This kind of used to be, especially I think if you went to Italy in the old country, people would just kind of stay where they're at, and that's kind of that the family structure. Obviously, today it's changing a lot. So, kind of 2 questions there. Feel free to riff as you feel free.
I've gone first every time, but I'm going to put you on the spot because we're a family of families.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to strengthening the family, I do think like political effort in the common sense of how we use that term can be applied in that direction. So what I mean by that is there are ways that laws are structured today that work against forming strong families. And so I'm hopeful that some of the politicians, even on the scene today, would think about like when it comes to wages, when it comes to parental leave and things like that, that we would take steps to help people form families, have children, and support them, et cetera. But like we've already thrown out this term a few times, subsidiarity, it starts there, and we can't hold out hope that something will kind of happen beyond our own local neighborhoods and communities. This is going to look different in different places. It's always dangerous, I think, to venture a picture. I think so Rachel and I lived in Pittsburgh for a time, and there are a group of Catholics
those are dark days. I'm glad those days are behind us.
We're happy to be back in Iowa, even having to put up with Hawkeye fans. We'll push through. But there were a group of friends at our church where they had all moved to the same neighborhood in Pittsburgh, and they they didn't make a big deal about it. They weren't pretentious about it, but just by living together and supporting each other, like if one mom had to take care of kids one day and another was going grocery shopping, they would check in first and say, can I pick something up? But that started to kind of build the sort of network where I think when life took unexpected turns, that families would be taken care of.
My two, one is very short and the other is controversial. The first one is like just actually pay people. If you don't pay people where they can like reasonably raise a family, we won't have strong families. If that means that people at the top of the economic chain have to take less, you have to decide families worth paying for. This is like a capital of any good business. If something's important, you have to pay for it. If you're not going to pay for people to have families, especially like in quote-unquote non-symbolic jobs, then you don't really care. You're just saying it. The second one is, this is strikes at home. We all have to stop acting like the sole goal of our children is to move up a social class. Like, you have to stop making society be about, like, getting your kids into Harvard. You have to stop making it that, like, at, like, age 6, we're going to put them in every little thing so that they have the best resume so that they can just, you know, astronomically rocket through life. You have to be okay with your kids being, quote-unquote, mediocre because you have to tell them there's things more important than ladder climbing. To make everything about ladder climbing, that's, like, what propels people to leave and go other places. That's what makes people decide that families are something you do after you're established. Look, it's also sort of true, right? Like, if you believe you're going to move somewhere else and you're not going to have family members, then you think you need to be established before you can start having kids. But that's because you've destroyed the establishment that should make it easy for you to have kids at a younger age.
One of my favorite lines all time, Mr. Sheevy. It comes from the great Mark Sheevy, philosopher, businessman here in town. You know, Mark's got 8 girls, and I remember him saying one time they've kind of opted out of all the sports stuff. They do a lot of music stuff. They're plenty busy, but they're not traveling every weekend to sports soccer. And he had some guy at work said, "Hey, I don't know how you guys do it. Your weekends must be crazy." He's like, "No, man. Like, we're free, man. Like, starting at 5 p.m. Friday through church on Sunday. Like, we're just kind of open. Probably gonna hang out, play some music together, maybe hang out behind the fire and stuff." And this guy has to like. He's got to drive to Kansas City, and his wife has to drive to Chicago to do the things. He's like, we just opted out of that, and we're opting into family instead. That stuck with me that even with all the kids, like, first off, there's never enough time. You can't physically do all the things. So you have to prioritize what are we going to do. And so I think coming back to the original thought of, like, you're trying to build the best family you can. What does that look like? Maybe take a step back and think through the prioritization of these things in your head.
But I mean, for me, and the reason what I'm saying the two are connected is that is absolutely the case for us who've been fortunate to find ourselves with steady employment as we go, hey, no worries, we have the option to opt into family like you're saying. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who have to work 2 jobs just to make sure that their kids have all the clothes and food they need. And so Catholics should work for a world if we care about families where people can opt into families. That, to me, is the sort of world we make. You don't have to veer into any sort of leftist politics or anything like that to make the argument. Whatever we could do to make sure people can opt into families. Like, I do like that way of putting it. Make a world where opting into families is not like a piece of cake, but certainly like doable, imaginable, and that like you can do it when you're young. Any of us who've had multiple kids, I've had 5, waking up with that baby in your 20s is quite different than late 30s and 40s. And that's not to like shame anyone. And anyone who's had a late child, I mean, like, all children are miracles, but miracles that wear you out. Mm-hmm. And so if, as a society at large, we're not going to make it conceivable for relatively young people to have children, then we can't be serious.
Rachel and I are 45 now, and my son Dominic, who's 8, he said to me this week, he not only wants a baby sibling now, but he wants Rachel and I have twin boys in our mid-40s.
Don't you put that on me, Ricky Bobby?
His daughter, his sisters won't play board games with him enough, so that's his prayer this holiday season. Whenever Catholics have these conversations, though, the one caveat that we have to throw in there is a way in which you can turn the family into an idol. Yeah. And like all good things in the world, it has to be properly ordered to bear the fruit that it's meant to bear. So I think to Mass this week, there was a reading for one of the daily Masses where Jesus says, anyone who wants to come after me and follow me must hate brother, sister, mother, father. And he kind of chides a man once who wants to go back and bury his father. There's all sorts of ways where Jesus signaled to those who are listening to him, like even the greatness of the family and the good things that come with it have to be subordinated to the calling of the kingdom. So as Catholics, how do we live that out? Like, I think one of the big ways is we have to celebrate when our children pursue a priestly or religious vocation and say, the eschatological kingdom that's breaking in, like that's really what this is all about. And insofar as we try to elevate the family above that, we're going to be straying down the wrong path.
And to be honest, what happens there is stop trying to make up for some deficiency in your childhood with your children. That's the idol. The idol making that is just, you see it everywhere, is you weren't cool enough, or you didn't win the state championship, or something about your childhood, and you are asking your child to do something they could never do, which is like have you live vicariously through them enough to make you happy with some fault or deficiency in your childhood. But the other one is that is literally an idol then, right? Like you are making your children objects of a devotion that is not God, and you have to stop doing that in order for Catholic families to be strong and Catholic.
If you like this kind of conversation, they can listen to the Uncommon Good when?
So it's broadcast on the weekends. Oh, man. I should have checked the schedule before. And I believe it's 6 p.m. on Saturdays and 2 p.m. on Sundays.
Yes, or inverted.
Or you listen to the podcast.
The podcast.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. It's the Uncommon Good. Well, Bo and Bud, thank you guys for joining me today. It's obviously a nice little veer for me from the very practical to maybe the more philosophical. But again, I think what I'm getting out of this conversation more than anything is this primacy of marriage. It's the importance of marriage. And I think you guys did a very good job with very fancy language and lots of degrees and letters after your name of explaining that. So thank you.
We try to go style over substance as much as possible.
Yeah. Ivory towers on top of ivory towers.
All right, well, we're going to head to a short break. Stick around, and we'll be right back.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from independent realtor Chris Foster. Chris has served clients with everything real estate throughout Iowa since 2019. 641-891-8178 or online at the number 4 saleia.com.
Support for programming provided by Intervisions Healthcare.
Would you like to join our medical team? Intervisions Healthcare, a free and faith-based medical clinic in Des Moines, serves women with unplanned pregnancies. We're looking for a registered nurse to help serve our patients. If you would like to come work for us, we'd love to talk to you. Give us a call today at 515-440-2273. If you're a compassionate, professional nurse looking to help vulnerable pregnant women, give us a call, 515-440-2273.
Ring in the new year with the Des Moines Symphony and the Doo-Wop Project. From the tunes of Frankie Valli, the Drifters, and the Four Seasons, to reimagined favorites by Michael Jackson, Jason Mraz, and Maroon 5. This is the hottest New Year's Eve ticket in town. Fill your New Year's Eve with the classic sounds of doo-wop. Tuesday, December 31st at 8 p.m. at the Civic Center. Learn more at dmsymphony.org. Thank you, Des Moines Symphony, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Divine Treasures, a Catholic book and gift store. Divine Treasures, 5701 Hickman Road, Des Moines, 515-255-5230. Thank you, Divine Treasures, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Caldwell Parish Funeral Home and Crematory. Caldwell Parish offers services that are unique to the individual while following the Catholic funeral rites. Caldwell Parish Funeral Home and Crematory, Des Moines' only Catholic-owned and operated funeral home.
From Baxter to Linden Heights and everywhere at iowacatholicradio.com or the Iowa Catholic Radio app. Listener-supported Iowa Catholic Radio, connecting listeners to Christ.
My help comes from you. You're right here.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. My thanks again to Bo and Bud. Important things to highlight from that interview. I think every time you get Bo on a rant, specifically around the just wage theory, which I love his passion for that. I think it's very, I think it's right on that. Right, if you're in a position where you can help as a member of society to give people a wage, or they can then raise a family. Again, that is like the job of when we think about a society. I like to think of the 1950s when one dad could go and raise a family. That actually didn't matter, right? That didn't matter a lot. And so, when we're voting, when you're getting involved with politics, that's something we need to be striving for. If you're a business owner, that's something we need to be striving for. But I think the biggest thing I got out of that interview is both of them holding up this primacy of marriage, this institution, this social building block of marriage. Now, the Catholic Church holds it up, as we talked about. Pope Leo XIII holds up marriage and subsidiarity, but also society writ large. This idea of the polis of having communities built on a social fabric of marriage. And if that's the case, if that is truly the most important piece to society, then this series means something, right? So if the purpose of this series is to build up marriages, and if marriages are the fundamental building block of society, we should all be striving, as Adam and Kara said a couple weeks ago, to have the most epic, best marriages we can, right? They talked about trying to do the best we could within our marriages to make them as great as possible. And I think that's something that all of us married people need to be called to do. And so as Bo and Bud set the framework of marriage as really what is the social fabric consists of strong marriages, what can you do within your own personal marriage and those around you to help build that? And so obviously I hope that's what the series is doing. Hopefully you're like I am, taking notes. I have done this already many times throughout the series. I've taken things that I've learned from some of the other people, and I'm bringing them into my marriage to help make my marriage stronger. And then by doing that, hopefully we're going to make other marriages stronger. So I think this really does help me to set the stage for why is the work that we're doing on this show today in this series so important. And I think Bo and Bud did a great job of explaining that. So thank you for joining me today on Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulos. It's time to man up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness.